Hi, this is David Cleverton from 360 Immersive. Today we have the pleasure of discussing instructional design and virtual reality. And to lead the discussion, we have Monica Price. Now, Monica is not only an instructional designer, but she has an extreme interest and passion for VR or virtual reality. Can you tell us just a little bit about how that started and where it's led you?
Right, so I started my master's program in, I think, 2009, and I did a paper on a game that I was playing at the time, and it was a Wii game, and you were a surgeon and you excised cancer tumors, right? And as I was playing that game and learning about all the instructional design.
Virtually, right?
Virtually, right,
sure.
It was totally virtually. I'm not a blood girl, it's not gonna happen. As I was learning about the theories and the scientific basis for instructional design, modern instructional design, it occurred to me that these games and these virtual realities, that this could be a really powerful overlay for the theories that we currently work with, right? Because currently we have these theories and we put them into instructor-led training, in person or virtually. We put them into PowerPoint, we put them into e-learnings, we put them into learnings you pull up on your phone, but we don't have the ability to have a scalable and cost-effective way to create an environment for people to apply knowledge, right? And what really excites me with the VR is that you can build an environment, right? And your brain works on patterns. It's always looking for pattern recognition. Right. So if you're walking into an environment that you're gonna be working in, right? Your training should always center around the work environment. You want it to be as close as possible. VR allows you to make it almost exact, right? You can have, if you had like different terrains that you needed mapped in there, you can get those, and then if you put somebody out on the field and they can see the terrain, it's gonna feel like they've been there before.
And you know, you use the word feel. We use that a lot, where if we're watching a PowerPoint presentation, or if we're watching, let's say it's a video, even a YouTube video, it's a passive experience. You're just watching. But in VR, you feel like you're there. You feel.
Right.
You feel.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, once your brain is engaged with your eyes and your ears, and what it sees and what it hears is real to it. Doesn't make a difference that it's virtual or not. To your mind, to your brain, that's real, right? It deepens the learning. So you can pick up a lot of information on YouTube videos. How do I groom my poodle, right? That's great, but you're only gonna learn so much at a certain level, right? And every time I need to groom my poodle again, I have to go back and look at that video because I've forgotten, right?
Right.
I haven't integrated it into my world. VR, I think, with some Merrill's principles overlaid onto the VR, you can teach inside that environment, you can do the application inside that environment, and you can have the learner integrate the knowledge into their world. Once the knowledge is integrated into their world, they can retrieve it at will, whenever they need it. Or, you know, even sometimes, like if you've ever walked into a room and you felt like you've been there before because there's a certain wallpaper or whatever, something feels familiar, and you can almost get that sort of deja vu training, right? So they've been in this environment, they've learned these things, they walk into this environment in the real world on the job, and it's almost like they've been there before, and there's a sort of a deja vu experience where they can then, I know what to do, right? I don't have to be trained, I don't have to go back and look, I don't have to upskill. Because you've done it before. Because you've done it before.
That's right. You know, if you think about it, the most impactful, and let's use training for a second, but the most impactful experience is something that you go out and do. Well, right. Of course, that's difficult in the training world. People and organizations run simulations all the time to help replicate that. But what if we could take that same experience that would build that degree of impact and ultimately lead to a degree of retention? So course and content retention is really your gold standard, right? You're looking for people to retain the knowledge that you design into a course. And VR it actually engages at a different level from a brain activity, correct? When you're actually, it's like muscle memory. You know, an athlete will go out, they'll do the same play, the same task over and over again to excel on the playing field.
Right.
Why don't we apply that same thing in training or education? And VR lets us do that.
Right. And training costs money. It
That's
does.
right.
It costs time, it costs money. And anytime you can go from novice to mastery and you can shorten that distance, you're going to save money, right? Like the athlete who just knows how to throw that ball or knows how to run, they've done that to the point of mastery, and it's taken them time, a lot of time. Well, when you're training your employees, you don't always have that amount of time to teach them to the mastery level. But if you can teach them to the mastery level, your business is going to do better, because now you have a whole field of people who are experts at what they're doing,
Right.
as opposed to somewhere in the middle, right, or at the novice level. You can say you've got onboarding training. You're onboarding your new employees. You're talking about a lot of investment in time and training to onboard those new employees to get them up to a level where they can be productive, whether it be manufacturing or on the phone. If you can reduce that time, right, and you can put them into that virtual environment and, like I said, overlay some of those principles and get them to pull that information into their world, then they're going to be able to excel to the mastery level faster. It's going to cost less overall, and you're going to have more productive employees in a shorter amount of time.
You know, there's a chart called the cone of experience. I don't know if you've seen that, but it basically deals with ways that we learn. Ways that we learn are reading a book, hearing something, seeing something, watching a video, maybe watching a PowerPoint presentation. And the amount of information that we can actually retain and take away from, that we can actually learn and go on and apply to our job or whatever the task that it might be. And that we know, for instance, reading a white paper is pretty low. You might retain 10% of it. It's just the way it is. Listening to something, a little bit higher. Watching a video, maybe it's at 30% retention. But doing something is suddenly your 70, 80, 90% retention and application of that knowledge. And that's where VR, especially VR simulation, really falls into it, because you can fall into that same category of taking the employees out and having them perform the task, but it's all virtual, so you can replicate it over and over and over again in a cost-effective manner.
Right, and you can coach them while they're doing it.
That's right.
Right? So, say you have a bank teller. They need to be able to interact with their customers, do procedures, follow regulations. And you can put them in that experience rather than having them read, here's the regulations, right? Because this is what happens a lot of time. Here's some compliance training. I'd like you to get through that. And then you come back to class and we're going to do a little exercise. They read the compliance training. Great.
Well, they check the box.
They check the box. But that doesn't mean they know what it is or how to apply it.
That's
right? But if you could take somebody and so you just sat down with them virtually and coach them through the whole process, they're going to integrate it into the world, because now they're in the place where they're going to be doing their job and they're learning in that place. So everything becomes more natural, right? And it becomes easier to access. Your brain's all about, it looks for patterns. Patterns are what pull up information. You want to activate those neurons. And the best way to do that is to make sure that it's as close to reality as possible, right? That's why white papers, you retain so little. Right? Because your brain has got to work hard.
It looks like this.
Right? Your brain's got to work hard to translate this into something that is actually going to happen in the real world, right? And so you lose brain power, so you only retain 10% of it.
So here's an interesting article. Last year in Forbes magazine, one of the top five industries to be dramatically changed by virtual reality in the near future is education and training. It so cries out for a new tool. We joke about the best tool that education and training has come up with in the last 20 years is PowerPoint. Now, we've all sat through what we call death by PowerPoint. I mean, it's literally you know, you're just grinding through it so you can check that box off. But imagine being able to take a few VR experiences and sprinkle into that 4-hour presentation. Suddenly your impact goes way up, your retention is off the charts, only because you give something, a learner, something that they can actually tie to, that ties them to the content, rather than just watching.
Right. And, you know, and it's great for me as a designer, because you don't know how many books I've had on how to not create death by PowerPoint presentations. And, you know, you struggle with that. It's just, sometimes it's hard. But to be able to put that application process in there in a way where you're just dropping them in a world, right?
That's right.
That is like so exciting for an instructional designer like myself, because, like, you know, they teach us all about application. That's where learning happens, right? You can present new knowledge, but applications where actual learning happens, where you encode it into your brain and store it in memory so you can pull it back up, right? And that's, you know, just to be able to drop somebody in there and have them apply it, you know that they're going to be, their synopses they're absorbing it, right? Because it's so real, right? And you have a lot of control because they're looking, you can see where their eyes are going. You know if they're engaged, because you can kind of tell if they're kind of like looking off to the side and not engaging with the content. You can track their eye movement.
And what we're really talking about there is what we call embedded assessments. So the whole idea behind being able to test a group of learners is maybe not even allow them to know or that they're being tested or evaluated within this learning experience, but because we can actually track exactly where they're looking and how they're doing specifically to that course content, we can understand a great deal. Some of the other technologies that are coming down the pipe, obviously multiplayer. So if you have a team situation where let's say we're doing a hazmat circumstance, and we want to have an incident commander, we want to have maybe 3 or 4 other team members. They all have specific roles, and they're all in this virtual environment, acting out the roles, doing the best practices and learning from it. And it's not just a singular experience. It's something that is shared, and so they learn better. Biometrics is another technology that's coming down the pipe. Technology like alternative endings, you know, certainly embedding testing strategy within that content. And that all comes back to instructional design.
Yes, because one of the things that I love and hate, multiple choice, right? I love it because it's easy. It's easy for me to create. I hate it because it's not really a test. It's not testing you in a real world environment. So really what I'm testing is, can you, you know, multiple guess this, you know, do you know enough? I mean, in the real world, when you go out to do your job, right, does anybody give you like a bubble sheet at the end?
No.
Right? It's just not realistic, but it is, I mean, it's the world that I have now in order to build instructional design. It's a constriction, right? It's like I have no tool other than like bubble sheets and multiple choice questions. It's really hard for companies to invest the money into doing more realistic tests, right? But virtual reality is more cost effective. So you can actually get a better test and not be so far out of budget, right? Because what I would love to do on my tests is put people in the situation and let's test them out. But the reality is like that's going to cost a lot more money, and you know, companies can't invest that. And I understand that, right? There's what I would love as the instructional designer, and then there's what your manager tells you have a budget for.
Understood, but if you had a tool that fit those budgetary constraints and actually gave you everything that you wanted from an instructional standpoint, we're there.
Right. And
I hate to tell you this, but we are there. Virtual reality will do that.
That's so exciting.
So we've had an opportunity to really talk about some in-depth conversation regarding instructional design, courseware, and a new technology called virtual reality or VR. It's exciting, and we'd like to thank you for joining us.